If you've ever watched millions spent on leadership training produce zero behavior change, especially in multicultural teams, this episode is for you. Welcome to Unlocking Intercultural Agility. I'm Marco Blankenberg, the International Director of KnowledgeWorks. And for over 25 years, I've worked with leaders in more than 70 countries, helping them navigate the cultural complexities of today's global workplace. This podcast is for leaders, HR professionals, and global teams who want to strengthen relationships and succeed across cultures. In each episode, we speak with skilled professionals from around the world about what actually works when it comes to leadership, culture, and behavior change. Today, we're exploring why learning and culture initiatives often fail and how an intercultural lens can help leaders create real, lasting change. Welcome to another episode, and a special welcome to Nicole. It's great to have you here. We've had the chance to work together for quite a few years across different roles that you've had. And now we're sitting here not just as colleagues and friends, but also as business partners. And you recently joined the KnowledgeWorks Partner Network. So welcome on this episode. I know we have a lot to talk about, but most importantly, who's Nicole? Share a little bit more about yourself before we dive into the topic of today.
Oh my gosh, how long have you got? Thank you for having me. Yeah, so our relationship goes back to 2018, so we've worked together for years. So thank you for the intro around myself as well. And in terms of what I'm doing now, so I'm really excited. I'm actually CEO and founder of my own company, so the Create Space Group, and I'm really excited to be partnering with KnowledgeWorks as one of my strategic business partners. So there's loads of things we're going to be working on together. Yes. Let's get into it.
Yeah, no, thank you. And having you in a very important place like Abu Dhabi is exciting because you recently moved there, or not too long ago at least. And you've had a chance of working across many different industries, and especially in the world of strategic HR, L&D. What skill gaps do you see across different industries that you're familiar with?
Thank you. Yeah, so I've been working in learning and development, leadership development for the past 15 years. And I think regardless of industry, whether it's oil and gas, politics, financial services, the key skill that keeps me in business and the complete lack is people skills and soft skills. I've worked with such intelligent people. So in terms of knowledge and technical skills, 100%, it's all there. But where the real gap is it's the soft skills, it's the people skills. It's how people communicate with each other. And that keeps me in business, but also it's a real challenge regardless of industry.
That's fascinating. So you're saying by and large across the board, you see that the technical skills are up to par?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, especially if you're working in financial services or in engineering, there's specific qualifications that people need to have, right? Because there's risk if people don't have those qualifications, then people's lives are at risk.
Yes,
literally. But when you look at behavioural competencies and how people behave, how people treat each other, there's no real need or even assessment that's done with part of that. So,
fascinating.
And I see a real lack of skills development in that area, just completely. So it's only really when you get into the workplace that then people start going, oh, wow, you're going to be working with other human beings and working with teams. How should you behave? So I think that's where we're seeing the really big skill gap.
Yeah. I in my executive coaching, I've seen that it's almost like that becomes like a hard ceiling from a leadership growth point of view. Yep. That if those people skills don't get developed, that they're not going to be able to progress any further in their career.
Absolutely. And I've seen it time and time again with companies that I've worked in. People go, oh, how do I get promoted? How do I become a leader? Well, it's not on technical skills. That will only get you so far.
Yeah.
Actually, in terms of leadership, and if you want to be a leader, it's how you lead, how you treat people, because your role as a leader is to take care of people in your charge. Right. It's kind of a parental role that you're responsible for so many different people now, and it's how they show up, how they behave, how they're motivated. That's your responsibility. So people skills is absolutely essential.
So to your point, so what actually happens on a team if a leader doesn't have those people skills? What breaks down?
Communication, collaboration, any other words beginning with C. It's how people interact. It become and I mean, we both know that there's different motivators for different people. People got different behavioral motivators, right? You could be task orientated, or you can be people and relationship orientated. If that leader is not bringing in those people skills, collaborating, really listening to people, then it becomes a very task-orientated team. Right. You don't feel close-knit. You don't feel integrated, and a sense of belonging. And especially when you're spending more time in the workplace than you are at home or with your families. People don't like saying, work is a family, but it's a type of family, right? It's a group of people coming together, and you want to have the best types of relationship. So to feel heard, to feel listened to, and connected with the people is so important. And that all starts with how you lead and how you show up.
Yeah, and I think it spills over beyond the team, obviously. It's not just, especially if it's a leadership team, but any other team, it cascades into the organization, but it also spills over into client engagement, into other people in your network, in your supply chain, etc. So getting the people side of the equation crafted is crucial there. Now, there's so many different ways of looking at some of those key skills that you just mentioned. Communication, you just mentioned that as well. But what is good communication? What's effective communication? Because we both work with very intercultural organizations. Yeah. So what does good look like, and why is it so difficult?
Oh, that's a great question, right? I think let's start with the basics. And this is going to look different potentially on all intercultural communities and all the different sort of nationalities that are working together as well. But if you take it back to human behaviors, as a human, you want to be listened to, right? You want to be listened to, you want to be heard, you want to be understood. So what does that look like from the other perspective, right? Well, it's actually being curious and asking questions to really understand the other person, understand their point of view, and take that on board. Because if you're not listening to your people, to your team, then you're just storming ahead and trying to hit results. So I think really that listening piece, whether it's pulse surveys, whether it's having interviews with people, whatever it is, you've really got to show that you are listening, but you're taking action on what you understand.
And it sounds actually really simple, but it's not.
Yeah.
The pressure is on. The world is continuously changing. Targets are typically set too high. Yeah. In the midst of that, to still have that skill and to still have that ability to slow down is not easy.
I've seen so many senior partners, senior people that I've worked with that really, when you talk about this skill and they go, that's basic, I have it. No, you don't. I can see it happening. Yeah. So it takes dedication. You really have to listen, not just go, I'm listening. Yeah. But, what is active listening, paying attention, summarizing some of those things back to people, asking clarifying questions. You can tell if someone is listening to you or not. It's in body language, it's in what they say.
So what you're explaining right now is more sort of at the anecdotal, experiential level, but HR has made a huge shift into actually measuring things. So how do you measure growth in people's skills or lack in people's skills? How do you do that when you've worked on multiple continents, you've lived in multiple countries as an HR practitioner? How do you do it?
Yeah, I think there's so many. That's a great question, right? Because the first thing to get cut with, if a company has to cut back on things, is learning and development budgets, because it's really hard to prove return on investment if you're looking at softer things. It's not qualitative or quantifiable, right? So there's a number of different things you can look at. One, the culture of the company. And when I'm talking about culture, what's attrition like? What are your retention rates like? How happy and motivated are your people? if people aren't happy, aren't motivated,
Right.
you're probably not asking the right questions or listening to them. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that all goes down to the bottom line in terms of productivity.
Yeah.
So there's so many tangible aspects in terms of the intention or what happens with behaviors and how that shows up in your numbers as well. So there's so many different parameters you can look at. So it depends on what's important or what the challenges are that your company is facing, that you can put something in there and see how values and behaviors can really help change your bottom line for the better, really.
Yeah. And I think, both of us agree on that. But in reality, very often people say, well, that's the job of the L&D department or of HR as a whole to make sure that gets implemented and make sure it gets measured. But I've also seen companies say, no, you as a leader or you as a manager, we're actually going to measure you on the culture you create on your team. We're going to measure you on how well you can retain your staff and how people experience your investment in developing your staff. Yeah. So it sounds... What I see a lot is the return on investment, the KPIs connected to it shouldn't just sit in the HR department, for instance. They should be owned. So say a bit more about that.
Absolutely, because as a team, who are you interacting with every day? You're probably not interacting and working with your learning and development and your HR departments every single day.
Right.
You're working with your manager.
Yeah.
You're working with your leaders. You're working with your team members. So if you think that behaviors is an HR or an L&D thing, you're completely wrong, right? Yeah. The buck stops and starts with you.
Yeah.
How you show up, how you treat other people is how, what's that saying about managers? You don't always remember what they do, but you remember how they make you feel.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Yeah, so
when we're talking about technical skills, you can look amazing on a piece of paper and deliver all these amazing results. But if you're willing to chuck your grandmother under a bus to get those results, and in terms of how you treat people, people are going to remember that. Yeah. So it really is how you treat your people, your team members. That's what drives results, retention, and motivation.
So how have you seen sort of the maturity of creating that learning strategy, connecting it to the strategy of the business, getting real KPIs in place? What's your experience? Are companies getting better at it? What are some of the things that you notice?
That's a great question. I think some are. I think it's a real challenge, though, because a lot of companies haven't really measured this before, or they're not really sure how to measure it. Especially with performance year-end ratings, they'll be maybe like a 1 to 5 scale rating. They're really great at maybe measuring knowledge and skills application, but when it comes to behaviours, that's quite hard to track.
Yeah.
But that's where I think if you are going to look at numbers, you can look at, like we said, the productivity of your team, how happy they are, what the attrition is like, and you can tell the culture of a team or a company by the retention and how people are doing. So I think if you want to look at behavioural change, start with values. Okay, and again, you can look at human values, but you can also look at your company values, because every company has values these days. And one thing is to talk about the values. How do you make the values show up? You've got to live them every single day through your behaviors and how you act, how you talk, how you treat other people. That's what makes the difference.
Right.
And that's how you can really track that, behaviors, track it back to values, and then you can make some tangible results there as well. So it's going to depend on the company and where your challenges are.
We've had quite a few crises that we've cycled through in the last few years, and based on what you just said, it's almost like if we invest money and time into efforts, like in this case learning and development, but we can't point to evidence that it's making a difference, then when the next crisis hits, it's very tempting to just, cut it all out and say we need to save money. Well, this stuff we don't have evidence that it works. It probably works, but I don't see the hard evidence for it. Yeah. So why is that the only reason why learning and development budgets are some of the first ones to get cut when another crisis hits? Yeah,
I think it's a great point. It's a great question, right? Because from what I've seen time and time again, it's like, our leaders need to be developed, create a leadership program. okay, great. What do you want to achieve? What is your measure of success? And I found time and time again, people and companies find that really hard to define what they want or what behavioral change they want. So you have to start with the end in mind. Right. So what are the KPIs? What do you want to achieve by the end of this program? And if you look at Kirkpatrick, levels, 1 to 4, etc., you usually do those kind of level 1 happy sheets straight after a program has happened. But if you want to look at behavioural change, that doesn't happen overnight. That happens over time. So you've got to be willing and able to actually track how that behaviour changes and what that impact is. And people aren't doing that properly as well. So you have to be really clear on the KPIs and what the timeline is to track and change that to be able to prove that return on investment, honestly.
Yeah, as you're saying that, I'm thinking, on the one hand, you have the people who are brilliant at coaching and facilitation, and then others are really good at designing. And then on top of that, you need yet other people who are really good at putting the metrics in place. And they're very seldom the same person. So having the right team also seems to be really important, and working together on ticking all those boxes that you mentioned.
Absolutely. And even if you haven't got a big learning development team or an HR team, you've got to have someone that can look at all of those aspects and have all of those skills. So I've designed programs from complete end to end. What are the KPIs? What do you want to achieve? Then you design, you develop it, you reiterate, but then you've got to keep on top of things, and you really got to track it over time. And that's just one program. And imagine you've got multiple programs. It becomes a real admin task. So, and that's another thing. I've never seen a learning management system that can help kind of automate and check that. That's a whole other thing, right? But I've never seen a system that can really help you or aid learning development people to track that over time. So we've got to have enablers in terms of technology and AI that can help us track that behavioral change as well.
And I think there's a whole evolution in that area. We won't go into AI, but it's quite a significant jump, I think, in gathering the evidence accurately and having that on the table. You and I have both worked with international organizations that span the globe sometimes, and what the old way of doing things when it comes to learning and development is that there is a center of excellence somewhere or a head office, and the head office, sorry to say, they cook up this amazing program, and then they say, ta-da, this is the next leadership iteration for this topic or that topic, and then the whole world has to run with that program. And then it doesn't, stuff happens. So you've seen that. So I'd love to hear from your perspective. What have you seen, and what happens if that place where they think they can design a program that the whole world will embrace, that the whole world will understand, that will solve all the local problems that you might have? Why is that being done over and over again? And what have you seen?
Oh, wow. Where do we start? No, I can think of a few examples at the moment. And do you know what? Just looking back at those programs, they're really complex. They're really high level as well, in terms of how they're designed. If you are looking at behaviours, again, they're expecting behaviour, great, overnight, we've done a 1 or 2 day course, that's going to change now, right?
Like plug and play.
Great, that's going to happen. Oh, well, but if you deliver that same program, in the US or in Saudi, that change isn't going to happen overnight. You're not. What I haven't seen is kind of that intercultural lens and the cultural agility, and how, if you're looking at a change program, how change ready are people, especially from different cultures or nationalities? You might be change averse, risk averse, or there's different priorities or ways to create change. So I think that is a massive gap. That's really not taken into consideration. How do you get people on board? How do you get that to create change to happen? And when these big programs are rolled out from a global level, there's usually no scope to adapt adapt to a local way of doing things to make it more culturally agile, to be honest.
Yeah. I'm reminded of one program that we got asked to join when it was already rolled out.
Yeah.
And it was a global rollout, so more than 100 countries involved. And it was all about the assumption that as a manager, let's say, reporting to a leader, I should, out of my own volition and enthusiasm, go to my boss and say, I've done some thinking about my own development. I want to do the following in 2026. And the assumption was that every manager in the world, in their organization, would automatically do that and would have a relationship with their boss where they could have that discussion up the hierarchy. And it totally fell flat.
Yeah.
Because there are many cultures where it's inappropriate or even shameful to have that type of conversation with your boss. And it was just a small thing, but the whole program was based on the premise you're a mature human being, you're a professional, you should be able to just kickstart that conversation with your boss and say, this is what I want to do in 2026. Your boss signs off on it and you get plugged into the program to go and do it.
Yeah.
And that was just one small example where that misalignment or making baseline assumptions that this is how humans should behave, or this is what we expect from all our managers around the world, and then design a whole program around it, and then wondering why it didn't work. Yeah.
I think that's a really interesting perspective, and that makes me think that, you know what, when we're looking at centres of excellence, those centres of excellence are probably in maybe one office or one area of the world, when really those centres of excellence should have a global, multicultural team. So when you're designing interactions, those types of questions are taken into consideration.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah.
But it's disruptive. Because it's much easier to sit around the table with people who think like you and who have the same cultural frame of reference.
Yeah, but then that's groupthink, isn't it? It doesn't add diversity. And do we work in teams or have clients that are only one nationality or have one way of seeing the world or one cultural lens? No.
Yeah.
So really, when you're designing learning programs, regardless of what the topic is, you've got to make sure that you're seeing it through all the different types of eyes and lenses that are going to be attending this program, from Timbuktu to India. How you see the world, how you show up, what your values are, how you raise a concern with your manager. It differs from culture to culture. So we've done intercultural intelligence and cultural agility accreditation and training together, right? And when you're looking at some of these things, there's so many things to consider there. And like you said, not everyone can approach the manager and say, this is what I want to do. These are my goals. And you said, in some cultures that can be quite shameful. Whereas in a centre of excellence, I think what I've probably seen is, it's right or wrong, black or white. It's my way or the highway. This is how we're going to do it. It's very logical thinking. There's no, what is, how are the avenues that this might show up in different cultures and countries as well. And so I think you have to look at that lens in terms of diversity.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned values a few times already, and I know a lot of emphasis in learning and development is on making the values of an organization come to life. But when I look at some of the ways values are quantified in organizations, you might have words like integrity or people first or we are collaborators or whatever an organization might put on as values. I often find that there's like a lost in translation situation happening. So there's sort of values that are defined. More and more companies nowadays put some behaviors underneath it. But then when that gets taken into learning journeys or learning objectives across the world, especially in intercultural situations, something disconnects or something misfires. What have you seen, and why do you think that happens?
I think that goes back to that centre of excellence question that we were talking about as well. who's creating the values and where are those values being created, right? Especially in terms of integrity, especially in risk and compliance. Integrity, I would interpret as, it's very right or wrong. It's doing the right thing, not the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And that's a cultural lens in terms of how some people see the world in terms of innocence and guilt. What is the right thing to do? What is the wrong thing to do? But that's not how everybody operates and how everybody thinks. So I think start with who is creating the values and how they're created. So again, you need to have that real cultural mix of teams. What is respect? That's another value that I see a lot.
That's a huge one. Yeah.
How does respect show up in your culture? How, what does that look like? How do you behave? So I think the co-creation of values, if you're a global company, is so important, because then on an intercultural perspective, you can then say, these are some of the examples of how this value can and will show up. And this is how you can measure it.
Yeah. The word respect is, of course, a big one. So what if you have 15 nationalities from different parts of the world, and they're reflecting on, the company wants us to be respectful with one another and respectful with our stakeholders and clients. And you have these 15 nationalities. What would it practically look like? Where are people going with that word? If there is no further clarification done, what can I expect?
To be honest, I think people feel pretty lost, right? What respect means in the UAE when you're talking with Emirati clients, for example, is going to look very different to the UK and how you interact and how you communicate with people. So I think you need to be quite clear on respect is how you show up in a cultural context, respecting cultural values and norms within your teams and with client relationships. That kind of statement would help encompass flexibility and not be quite rigid then as well. So I think when you're explaining those types of values and how they show up, that gives you a bit of a nuance of how you can change and how you can also measure that as well.
So in other words, it's not as easy as saying, okay, here's respect, here's what we mean by it, and there's maybe a little paragraph that fleshes this out, and then you're done.
Yeah.
So what you're saying, it's much broader, but it also sounds like that there's then a need to learn how to do that almost more intuitively and learning to figure out what that looks like. So some of it can be documented from the company side, but it's also the skill set of your employees that would need to be developed in a different way.
Definitely, and I think that goes to cultural curiosity and agility, right? Because the way that you like to do things or the way that you communicate with people isn't necessarily going to be the right way for everyone.
Yeah.
So so that's what keeps us in a job, right? It's the ability to develop those skills and to pick up on those cultural nuances and adapt your communication style, both physical and verbal, so that you can build trusted relationships across so many different countries. Because if you're not able to do that, then really, what's that going to look like with an intercultural team and with clients across the globe? It's so important. And if you're ignoring that factor, then you really are setting yourself up for failure. Yeah.
I'm thinking of another example. One of our facilitators is a master at ideation and design thinking. And he discovered that design thinking in and of itself is a beautiful approach to coming up with creative solutions and solving complex issues. But he said, you can't just assume that everybody will embrace those techniques and will start freely using them with the people in the room. He said, I would always have to go back to -0 almost, and first create the culture where the design thinking approach could flow between people. And he said if he didn't do that, then it wouldn't work.
No.
So great ideas conceptually, but then in intercultural complexity, it becomes much harder, and culture creation then becomes a really important part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it goes back to, I think, psychological safety and that ability to, ask questions and actually listen within a group.
Yeah.
So how brave and how courageous can you be if you have a grievance, for instance, or you're not happy with the process or how something is happening, to be able to share that in a cultural context.
Yeah. And how safe is it to put my ideas on the table?
Exactly.
What is my lived experience in this company when I put an idea on the table? What's being done with it? Anyway, that's something we could talk about. But I think we're getting to some of these core issues. Another thing that I often see is that one of the famous phrases is culture eats strategy for breakfast. And culture is very much, we call it the sum total of our thinking, speaking, and acting. That creates the culture.
Yeah.
And of course, the skills, competencies, and habits and behaviors that I bring into that culture has a direct impact. But I often see a disconnect. So the leadership development programs versus the strategic objectives of the business, in my mind, they logically belong together. The one needs to flow out of the other and needs to inform the other. But where does that disconnect come from? As an HR practitioner, what have you seen?
Honestly, learning and development not being invited to the table. If a company wants to be a major AI developer, or they want to lead in a particular way in 1, 3, or 5 years' time, as an L&D practitioner or as an HR person, you need to know that. Yeah. You need to be part of those conversations, asking those the right questions. So when they say, right, you want to be a leader in X business or in this category, what does that mean? What does success look like for you? And then you can kind of track back and go, right, what type of knowledge, skills, and behaviors do we need within this company to help you reach that target strategically?
So it's reverse engineering almost from the strategy and the objectives, and say, what do we need? Absolutely.
And that goes for leadership programs, it goes for technical skills programs, it goes for behaviors. If you're not part of that, if you're not part of that table and having those discussions, or at least invited to that table, how are you supposed to help reach those strategic behaviors?
So it sounds like there might, if that's not done, some programs might actually not assist with equipping people to pursue that strategic objective.
No, and exactly, and especially if a CEO partner goes, oh, we need a leadership program, it becomes a nice to have because you don't know what the strategic objectives are. Okay, why are you asking for a leadership program? What challenges are you facing at the moment that need to be solved? And how do the behaviors of your current leadership team or your future leaders need to change to help you achieve those strategic objectives? So it's the ability to ask those sometimes challenging and hard questions. That's what's going to get you the results. Because if you don't have that space to ask them, how on earth are you supposed to help achieve them through development programs?
Just on a side note, what I've also seen is companies, they don't want to put the hard work in. And then they pick one of the Ivy League universities and they say, well, if it's from there, then it must be good. And that they hope and pray that they plug it in and then magically it will then have the results. But what have you seen in maybe a practical example of where a program was not assisting with retention, with performance, with collaboration across borders, intercultural collaboration? Can you think of an example where that happened without maybe mentioning specific names?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think especially with International Women's Day coming up soon, right? I've been asked to design International Women's Day programs before. And one of the first questions I ask is, well, okay, what's your challenges? What are you hoping to change? Oh, we don't know. We just want something. What's the point of
box to tick?
Yeah, it becomes a tick box exercise. So what is going to be the point of the program then? And that goes to return on investment. If you can't prove any change in terms of behaviors, what is the point of having that program? And you mentioned with, those top universities, there's a lot of different cultures, I would say, that I've worked with, that working with, the likes of MIT or Harvard, it's a status thing. Oh, we've got this certificate, we've got this, but actually, does that really help your strategic objectives or the real challenges that are happening within your company at the moment? And in terms of, co-creation is absolutely important. It's not just a plug in and play. That's not always going to work.
Yeah. So what would it take? What would it take to create let's say a leadership program that really fully aligns into the strategy, that gets people ready to design, implement, pursue the strategy, deal with the changes and the disruptors? What would it take? You already mentioned L&D needs to be at the table.
Yeah.
So they need to fully understand.
It's the time and space to ask those hard questions. But also to have a psychological, if you were the CEO and I was coming in as the L&D partner, that space to be able to ask you those hard questions. What is not working right now? Okay. Where do you want to be in X years? What are the challenges that you foresee? And shaping, whether it's leadership programs, whether it's development programs for the whole company, it's that don't over-engineer things. Keep it simple.
Yeah.
And that's what I see with these programs that roll out that are really complex, and they go, yeah, this is going to help shape everything and change everything. I've gone back to companies recently that I used to work with, and I go, oh, are you still running that program? Oh no, what's that?
And they put so much effort into
so much money, so much time in terms of designing those programs, and 5-6 years later, nobody's heard of them. So they're falling flat on their face. So you've really got to be asking those difficult questions and helping to shape programs that are going to last the test of time.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. What is those shifting behaviors that you want to see? And if you're leading with technical skills or knowledge, that's not behavioral shift. And remember, it's how you want people to feel at the end of this. That is what people are going to remember, and how ready are they to be able to do that. So I think stripping it back to human behaviors, motivations. Why are you attending this program? You're attending it because you've been told to attend it. Yeah.
Or sometimes, worst case scenario, I'm away from the office.
Exactly. And that's some of the questions that I actually ask people, why are you here today? And I'll put up a multiple choice. Oh, it was a day off of client site or away from the office. I'm really excited to help with I help with this program or create change. I've no idea what this program is.
I was told by my boss to be here.
Told by my boss, right? Or it meets my learning hours. These are some of the things that we see. So you've really got to be clear on what the program is, what it's aiming to achieve, and get people excited, because they're going to be ready to learn and ready to help implement that change. And it's just like you said with implementing change programs. If you don't do that beginning work in terms of why are we doing this and stripping that back, you're setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah, absolutely. As you're speaking, it also sounds like there is certain core learning pieces you're saying that can stand the test of time. But then also we live in a very fast changing world. So there are other pieces that maybe might come and go. How do you see that? Because that's really hard to manage, or really hard to design. So core pieces that last maybe 5-10 years and they're still there, but others because the world is changing. So how do you do that? How do you get that balance right?
I think that's a really interesting question. I think one of the topics that I keep being asked to design or come back and help with, performance management, performance development. Come on, really, we've been doing this for how many years now?
Yes.
This should, something obviously isn't working. How to give or have feedback conversations, right? Coaching is not, coaching culture. That's not implemented. How to, when you're looking at managing people, you're promoted to a manager, but they haven't helped develop the skills for you to get there, so that again, they're setting you up for failure. So how do you motivate people? How do you delegate? How do you, if you look at situational coaching model, for instance. So I think there's core human interactions. I think if you look at knowledge and skills, they're going to change, especially with things like an advancement in AI. That is changing overnight. An AI program that you write today is going to be out of date in a few months or even next year. But human behaviors, how we communicate with each other, how we interact, and cultural nuances, they stand the test of time and they don't shift so quickly. So I think if you focus on those and how we interact with each other, what motivates us, what stresses us out, and work on those are the ones that really can stand the test of time. And there's so much research and models that we can use out there, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions of a team. All pyramids. But if you look at those types of behaviors in terms of safety, psychological safety, how people want to feel in terms, and then into self-actualization. Yes, I mean, some of those models of, people say, it doesn't always work, but there's a lot in there that you want to feel needed, wanted, accepted, listened to. If you work on those, that is what's going to make a huge impact, I think.
And it also sounds like that core human side of developing your people and really making that sustainable, but then also linking it to what culture do we want to create in the organization, and that becomes part of the L&D strategy. So that's the core, and the rest is all dictated by the products we sell, the clients we serve, the demographic and challenges of our world, and throw AI into the mix. And again, that shifts what we might need to prioritize with people. We both work with organizations that are often global, and often strategy has to be driven globally, and working with international leaders, those challenges of knowing the complexities that are evolving in the world, just staying on top of that, and then asking the question, what does that mean for me, my team, the strategy I'm driving? I often find leaders struggle with that. There's so much to consider and so much to continuously keep your finger on. And we both, are firm believers in intercultural agility. But at what point do you think intercultural agility becomes important for leaders who either are already global or who might aspire to go global?
How important?
Yeah. When do you plug it in? Because it's often an afterthought or a nice thing to have. Or how do you see that?
Yesterday. When should you start doing it? When was the best time to invest in X company? 20 years ago, right? So if you're going to start anywhere, start today. Okay. And if you don't know where to start with simple things like asking questions. If it's asking, if you've got clients from all over the world, listen to them, ask questions, and that's how you become a trusted advisor, isn't it? What's if you were my client, I'd ask, what's keeping you awake at night? What risk do you see coming up that you need help with? How can we help with that? It's really listening and then kind of diving deeper into those questions. If you ask those questions, if you don't know how to start with your team, start with your clients, because actually practicing asking those open-ended questions with your clients, you're going to get greater insight. You're going to build trusted relationships with them. And as a customer, as a client, I go, wow, they're listening to me. They actually want to understand what my challenges are and what I find really difficult. And then you don't have to work at them becoming a returning customer, a repeat customer.
Because the relationship is there, the trust is there.
Exactly. If you don't work on the relationship and it just becomes transactional, when the next company comes up that can do something cheaper and quicker, they're going to go with them. Whereas if you stick with someone that understands you and that really asks those questions and keep, okay, last year you said this was the challenge, or a couple of months ago, is that still the case? And you go, well, no, actually things are changing in this direction now. Okay, great. Let's change course and see how we can help change you with that.
Fantastic.
That feels like you're really listened to and understood. That goes back to my earlier statement, doesn't it? As human beings, just being listened and understood. It's clients as well as your teams.
Yeah, creating space for each other's stories is crucial in intercultural work. So leaders should not just see intercultural agility as an afterthought. It's probably a key ingredient of their success as a leader in a global world.
Absolutely, and especially in the geopolitical world that we live in right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Understanding everybody is absolutely paramount.
Yeah. Well, we've explored some of the challenges, and I really love the way you bring your lived experience, your expertise as a professional to these difficult topics. So it's not just theory, it's actually lived experience. Looking at why L&D is hard to design, why it's hard to measure, how to make it part of the strategic direction of the organization, but also looking at the intercultural complexity, especially if it's a global organization, and how to bring all of that together. So in our next episode, we want to talk about, okay, what do we do with this? And how do we map strategy and L&D? How do we map it to the values of the organization, to the impact the organization wants to have, enhancing retention, collaboration, engagement of employees, etc. So looking forward to diving deeper into that and learning more from your 15 plus years of experience in doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole.
Looking forward. Cheers.
As we wrap up part 1 here with Nicole, one thing really stands out. Organizations around the world pour so much time and resources into leadership development and L&D initiatives, and yet many just don't create that lasting behavioral change we all hoped for. Now, as we explore today, it's not because leaders don't care or intentions are lacking. Far from it. More often than not, it's those invisible dynamics at play. The cultural assumptions, gaps in people's skills, and those plug-and-play global programs that overlook the real intercultural realities in our workplaces. In our conversation, we've unpacked why these efforts can fail so quickly, but we haven't had the chance to look at how we can make these efforts succeed. So join us for part 2, where we get practical, diving deeper into how to design L&D initiatives that truly align with your business strategy, turn values into measurable behaviors, and build the psychological safety that lets teams thrive. You don't want to miss it. If this episode resonates, share it with a colleague, leave a comment, and drop a review on your favorite podcast platform. It helps others find us. And lastly, don't forget to check knowledgeworks.com for resources, including our Intercultural Intelligence certification. Thanks for listening, and looking forward to seeing you for part 2 of my conversation with Nicole.